witches, how you doing today? We are back with our regularly scheduled programming, and we are starting off with a book review. Today we are going to take a look at The Witch's Sabbath, an exploration of history, folklore, and modern practice by Kelden, published in 2022 by Llewellyn. You might be familiar with Kelden from his previous book, which I also highly recommend, The Crooked Path, an Introduction to Traditional Witchcraft. If you haven't heard of that one, I will link my review of that book in the description below. But otherwise, we're going to talk about The Witch's Sabbath today. Wow, this book is amazing. But before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about The Witch's Sabbath. What is The Witch's Sabbath? I think there's sometimes a bit of confusion with this book. People hear Sabbath and they think Sabbath, right? Like the Sabbath's the wheel of the year. That could not be further from what this book is about. The Witch's Sabbath is an otherworldly gathering of witches, sometimes attended by the devil himself, for the purposes of celebration, spell work, rituals, learning, communing with spirits, to name just a few of the functions. It's an idea that dates back to the Middle Ages, and it came sort of to fruition during the witch trials, the witch hunts and their associated witch trials. It is a very old idea that was sort of captured in the witch trial folklore. And Kelden actually discusses this in the book. So this book is for anyone, but especially any witches, wanting to know more about transvection, flying out, hedge crossing, otherworldly travel. Okay? And I get questions all the time about people saying, can you tell me more? How do you do it? What is, like, I don't really understand. What is it about? This is the book that explains it all, like in detail. Okay? So we're going to go through the chapters one at a time so you can kind of get an idea of what the book is about. So chapter 1 is Stoking the Sabbath Fire. He gives a detailed history, backed up with extensive footnotes that link to an extensive bibliography, and there's even a recommended reading list. I mean, he even gets into like the etymology of the word Sabbath. So if you're kind of interested in that sort of academic stuff, wow, chapter 1, packed full. It is a ton of history. I mean, Kelden is an academic researcher, and I mean, he more than did his work. It's an amazing chapter. Some of you, it might be a little academic. You might want to just skip over it. But for those of you like me who are like, I want to know all the details, I want to know exactly where this comes from, this is the chapter. Chapter 2 is a resurrection of the Sabbath, where he talks about the modern interpretations and the revival of the witches' Sabbath practices in modern times. Chapter 3 is Sabbath haunts, times, and travels. So he gets into the location, the timing, the dates, the transportation, and the implements of flight, including flying ointment, which is kind of cool. Gives some recipes in there for his recipe for non-toxic flying ointment, and some other sort of recipes for other things you can make to sort of aid you in this flying out. Chapter 4 is Over the Hedge and Through the Air. And he basically gets into the landscape of the other world, and then into spirit flight and visualization and breathing exercises and brain waves and muscle relaxation. It's a very practical how-to chapter. It's packed full of exercises and recipes. Very good. Chapter 5 is A Strange and Sinister Company, and he talks about the entities that you might meet at the Sabbath in the other world. So he talks about the devil, the queen of the Sabbath, familiars, and fairies. Chapter 6 is the Sabbath Circle. So it's about working with spirits in both the physical realm and the other world. And he gets into deities, other witches, familiar spirits, the fair folk, and ancestors. And basically he talks about sort of how do you engage with them to create relationships? How do you banish an unwanted entity? And how do you call in a specific spirit or entity that you specifically want to contact and work with? Chapter 7 is Wicked Rites and Debauched Revelries. And again, we're going to go back in history now and take a historical look at specific practices that were thought to be important to the Witch's Sabbath. Some of which we definitely still work with today, some of which not so much, but fascinating stuff. So things like initiations, blasphemy, the Black Mass, performing malefica, such as harming humans and livestock and destruction of crops, feasting, cannibalism, dancing, music, sex. Whew, like, let me tell you guys, this chapter is off the hook. I mean, cannibalism and sex in a single chapter. Like, I cannot speak highly enough. Like, so much fun. And then finally, we end on chapter 8, which is dancing the devil's ground. So he gives some final practical advice, a few additional tools and instructions to create them. And then he gives you a simple ritual and a complex ritual examples, fully written out for a solo practitioner, as well as how to adapt it for coven work. I mean, so practical. So he's not just like, here's all the history. Here's all of the nitty-gritty details. Here's how you do all of these different little bits. And then here's like the ritual to put it all together and really, and do it up. So this book is packed full of like great information, but we're not even done. So there's 8 chapters. Then it's followed up by an appendix, which is of all the accused witches, most of which he references at some point through the book. So their name, the date that they were, the year that they were accused, and it's from all around the world. So it's not just British witches. There's like Poland's in there. He's got the States in there. It's kind of all over the world. There's a glossary. So if you're reading and you're having trouble remembering what some of these terms are, there's an excellent glossary. And like I said, there's a recommended reading list and a complete bibliography. So if you want to do some further research, like, it's all at your fingertips. So to me, this is just a masterful work on not just the Witch's Sabbath, but otherworldly travel in general. It's got everything you could possibly want to know and more. So it is going to go, this book right here, is going to the top of my recommended reading list, especially for all the questions that I get on people asking about otherworldly travel. This is the book that you want. Okay? The Witch's Sabbath by Kelden, an exploration of history, folklore, and modern practice. Amazing book. Definitely fills a hole in the sort of, I think, the witchcraft book genre. We were needing something like this that is just focused on otherworldly travel. So yeah, pick up a copy. If you have read it, I would love to know what you thought. Leave us a comment below. And otherwise, yeah, that's our video for today. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks so much, you guys.